The gleaming halls of Centauri Medical Station hummed with the usual morning activity as Dr. ZYX-427 adjusted their iridescent medical coat. Fresh from the galaxy's most prestigious medical academy, they were eager to begin their first day in the emergency department. Their 6 sensory appendages twitched with anticipation, each one carefully calibrated to detect the slightest biological anomaly in any of the 17 recognized sentient species. The emergency department's quantum doors whispered open, revealing Dr. Nexus, the towering crystalline chief of medicine. "Ah, ZYX-427, excellent timing. Your first patient arrives in approximately 3 minutes. Nothing too challenging, just a routine case to start your day." Dr. ZYX-427's bioluminescent patches glowed with pride. They had graduated top of their class, mastering everything from Andromedian cellular regeneration to Zeta-9 quantum consciousness transfer. What could possibly surprise them? The answer came crashing through the emergency department doors exactly 2 minutes and 47 seconds later. Literally crashing, as the human stumbled in while simultaneously attempting to read something on a primitive digital device, drink a steaming beverage, and carry what appeared to be a damaged plasma converter under one arm. "Hi there." The human called out cheerfully, despite the fact that their right leg was bent at an angle that violated several laws of physics. "Don't suppose you could take a quick look at this? Had a bit of an accident with the station's gravity generators." Dr. ZYX-427's medical sensors began screaming in protest. The readings couldn't be correct. According to their instruments, this human had 3 fractured ribs, a dislocated shoulder, and enough tissue damage to send most species into immediate shock. Yet here they stood, casually sipping their beverage as if discussing the weather. "Please," Dr. ZYX-427's professional voice modulator cracked slightly, "lie down immediately. How are you even conscious?" The human, who introduced themselves as Engineer Jackson, glanced down at their injuries as if noticing them for the first time. "Oh, this? It's not too bad. Mostly worried about getting this converter fixed before lunch break ends. You wouldn't believe the paperwork involved in an extended maintenance delay." Nurse Pulsar, a veteran of the emergency department whose gaseous form swirled with barely contained amusement, floated over. "Another human working through fatal injuries because of bureaucratic deadlines?" "Fatal?" Jackson looked genuinely confused. "Nah, I've had way worse. This one time on Jupiter Station dash." "Please," Dr. ZYX-427 interrupted, their medical training wrestling with the impossible scene before them, "we need to begin treatment immediately. Your vital signs are..." They trailed off, staring at their readings in disbelief. Despite injuries that should have sent the human system into complete shutdown, their vital signs were only slightly elevated. More concerning was the presence of numerous chemical compounds that their sensors couldn't even identify. "Are you currently on any medications?" Dr. ZYX-427 asked, trying to make sense of the readings. "Just coffee," Jackson replied, holding up their beverage. "Double shot of espresso. Helps with the pain." Dr. ZYX-427's secondary processing unit nearly short-circuited. "This coffee, it's a pain suppressant." Among other things, Nurse Pulsar's gaseous form rippled with what might have been laughter. "Wait until you learn about what they call energy drinks." As they began treatment, Dr. ZYX-427 watched in fascination as Jackson's body actively fought against the standard pain management protocols. Their system seemed to be producing its own cocktail of chemicals that defied conventional medical understanding. "Fascinating," Dr. Nexus observed, their crystalline form refracting light in patterns of scientific interest. "Notice how the human cellular structure is already beginning to adapt and repair itself. We haven't even started regenerative therapy yet. Is this normal for humans?" Dr. ZYX-427 asked, their professional composure slipping slightly. "Oh, this is nothing," Jackson chimed in, now typing one-handed on their device while their bones literally knit themselves back together. You should see what happens when we get really motivated. Ever heard of something called mom strength? Now that's when things get interesting. By the end of treatment, Dr. ZYX, 427 had filled 3 separate data tablets with observations that seemingly violated everything they'd learned in medical school. The human's healing rate was unprecedented, their pain tolerance defied explanation, and their casual attitude toward life-threatening injuries suggested either remarkable bravery or complete insanity. As Jackson prepared to leave, against medical advice but apparently unstoppable, Dr. Nexus placed a crystalline appendage on Dr. ZYX 427's shoulder. And now you understand why we have a separate wing for human patients. But the readings, the healing rates, the impossible chemical interactions. Welcome to human medicine, Doctor, Nurse Pulsar swirled sympathetically. Where everything you learned in medical school is more of a suggestion than a rule. Dr. ZYX 427 watched as Jackson actually walked, while simultaneously scheduling their next maintenance shift, finishing their coffee, and explaining complex repair procedures to a junior engineer via their communication device. That evening, Dr. ZYX 427 began a new research project, Human Medical Anomalies and Their Implications for Galactic Healthcare. Their first entry simply read, "Everything we think we know about medical science needs to be reconsidered." Little did they know, this was just the beginning of their journey into the mysterious and often baffling world of human medical care. Dr. ZYX 427 stared at the holographic display floating above their research station, their bioluminescent patches pulsing with increasing agitation. The data couldn't be correct. They'd checked the calibration of their equipment 17 times, yet the results remained stubbornly, impossibly consistent. Remarkable, isn't it? Dr. Nexus's crystalline form cast prismatic patterns across the laboratory walls. And this is just from the past lunar cycle. The display showed medical records from across the station, a human maintenance worker who continued repairing critical systems with a punctured lung, claiming they couldn't leave the job half-finished. A human chef who suffered third-degree plasma burns but insisted on completing their shift because everyone was looking forward to Taco Tuesday. A human security officer who pursued a malfunctioning drone through 3 decks with a broken ankle because paperwork's worse than the injury. But it defies everything we know about biology, Dr. ZYX 427 protested, their sensory appendages twitching in scientific distress. Look at these hormone levels. According to all established medical knowledge, this combination of chemicals should be lethal. Yet they produce it naturally, seemingly at will. Dr. Nexus's crystalline structure hummed thoughtfully. Perhaps that's why the Galactic Medical Council has been so reluctant to publish our findings. It challenges too many fundamental assumptions. Their discussion was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Vapora, 6, the station's leading xenobiologist. Their gaseous form swirled with excitement as they deposited a new data crystal into the holographic display. "You need to see this," they announced, their voice crackling with static electricity. "We just finished analyzing the cellular samples from last week's mining accident." The display shifted to show microscopic images of human tissue regeneration. Dr. ZYX 427's primary processing unit nearly crashed at the implications. "Their cells," they whispered, "they're not just healing, they're adapting." "Precisely," Dr. Vapora, 6 confirmed. "Every injury, every trauma, every biological challenge, their bodies don't just recover, they improve. It's as if their entire physiology operates on the principle of, what doesn't kill me makes me stronger." "They have a saying like that," Nurse Pulsar contributed, drifting into the laboratory. "Along with something about rubbing dirt in wounds and walking off potentially fatal injuries." The research team spent hours analyzing the new data. Human medical records revealed patterns that seemed to defy the very laws of nature. Their bodies could process substances that should be lethal, repair damage that should be permanent, and adapt to conditions that should be unsurvivable. "Look at this case," Dr. ZYX 427 highlighted a particular file. "Engineer Thompson from Maintenance Section 7. exposed to vacuum for nearly 2 minutes during an emergency airlock repair. Not only did they survive, they finished the repair before seeking medical attention. Ah yes, Nurse Pulsar swirled nostalgically. They said something about holding their breath as if deep space was merely a large pool of water. Dr. Nexus's crystalline form shifted to a frequency indicating deep concern. The implications for medical science are staggering. If we could understand how humans achieve these feats. That's assuming they know themselves, Dr. Vapora, 6 interjected. Most of them seem genuinely surprised when we inform them that their abilities are unusual. They appear to think all species can simply tough it out, or walk it off. The research team's discussion was interrupted by an urgent alert from the emergency department. Another human had arrived, this time with injuries sustained while attempting to manually redirect a plasma flow because the automated system was taking too long. As they hurried to the emergency department, Dr. ZYX-427 couldn't help but notice a pattern forming. It wasn't just the humans' incredible physical resilience that defied explanation, it was their seemingly boundless determination to continue functioning despite their injuries. The new patient, a quantum engineer named Rodriguez, was calmly explaining their situation while their cellular structure actively fought against severe radiation exposure. So I figured, the safety protocols are more like guidelines, right? And we couldn't let the whole station lose power just because the system was being overcautious. Dr. ZYX-427 added another entry to their growing research file, Human Risk Assessment Protocols, apparently optional. Later that evening, as the research team compiled their findings, Dr. Nexus made a decision that would change the course of galactic medicine. We need to establish a separate research division, they announced, their crystalline form resonating with authority. Dedicated solely to understanding human medical anomalies. Our current frameworks simply aren't equipped to handle their uniqueness. Dr. ZYX-427 looked at their latest batch of impossible test results and couldn't help but agree. Humans weren't just pushing the boundaries of known medical science, they were completely ignoring them, and somehow thriving in the process. As if to emphasize this point, their data pad pinged with an update. Engineer Rodriguez had not only recovered from radiation exposure that should have been fatal, but was requesting clearance to return to work because they had a few ideas about improving the plasma flow system. The implications were clear: traditional medical science would need to be completely re-evaluated in light of human physiology. The question wasn't just how humans survived the impossible. It was whether their seemingly limitless adaptability might hold the key to revolutionizing medical treatment across the galaxy. The day of the adrenaline incident, as it would later be known, began like any other on Centauri Medical Station. Dr. ZYX-427 was updating their research files when the emergency alerts began blaring across all frequencies. A catastrophic malfunction in the station's artificial gravity system had caused multiple deck collapses in the cargo section. As emergency teams mobilized, Dr. ZYX-427 and their colleagues prepared for mass casualties. What they weren't prepared for was what they would witness from the human crew members. Status report, Dr. Nexus demanded as the first victims arrived. You're not going to believe this, Nurse Pulsar's gaseous form swirled with agitation. The humans, they're already conducting rescue operations. Without safety equipment. In unstable gravity conditions. The medical team watched in astonishment through the emergency feed as human crew members performed seemingly impossible feats. Security Officer Wilson was lifting fallen support beams that weighed several times their body mass. Engineer Patel had crawled through a collapsed maintenance shaft that was literally on fire to reach trapped crew members. Their hormone levels are off the charts, Dr. Vapora, 6 reported, analyzing the biological data streaming in. Particularly this compound they call adrenaline. It's completely rewiring their physiological limitations in real time. Dr. ZYX-427's medical sensors were registering unprecedented readings. The human's muscles were operating beyond their structural capacity, their pain receptors were completely suppressed, and their decision-making centers showed patterns that suggested they were fully aware of the dangers but choosing to ignore them. Look at this one. Dr. Nexus's crystalline form vibrated with excitement and concern. A human maintenance worker named Torres was holding up a collapsed ceiling section with one arm while helping evacuate a group of junior engineers with the other. According to all known physics, the weight should have crushed them instantly. How are they generating this kind of strength? Dr. ZYX, 427, wondered aloud. They call it hysterical strength, Nurse Pulsar explained. Apparently, it's some sort of emergency response system. Their bodies just decide that physical limitations are optional in crisis situations. The medical team worked tirelessly as more casualties arrived, but it was the aftermath that truly defied explanation. Once the crisis was contained, the human crew members who had performed these extraordinary feats began arriving at the medical bay. Most of them had to be physically compelled to seek treatment. I don't need medical attention, Torres protested while sporting multiple fractures and severe muscle tears. Just give me a coffee and point me toward the next problem that needs fixing. Dr. ZYX, 427, was documenting everything, their sensory appendages working overtime to process the flood of new data. The humans had not only survived conditions that should have been fatal, but they had done so while performing physical feats that violated multiple laws of physics. It's not just their bodies, Dr. Vapora, 6 observed, reviewing the incident data. Their entire neural architecture seems to reconfigure under stress. They become stronger, faster, more resistant to damage, and completely ignore survival instincts that should be fundamental to any species. The research team spent weeks analyzing the data from the adrenaline incident. They discovered that human bodies contained backup systems within backup systems, redundancies that could take over when primary functions failed, and most remarkably, the ability to temporarily override their own physical limitations. We need to completely revise our understanding of emergency medical protocols, Dr. Nexus announced. Traditional triage categories don't apply when dealing with humans. They simply refuse to follow standard medical logic. Dr. ZYX, 427, added several new entries to their research files. Human emergency response, physical limitations appear to be more of a suggestion than a rule. Pain response can be completely suppressed by sufficient motivation or caffeine intake. Survival instincts, present but frequently ignored in favor of helping others. The adrenaline incident had provided unprecedented insights into human capabilities, but it had also raised disturbing questions. If humans could routinely survive conditions that should be fatal, perform feats that should be impossible, and ignore biological imperatives that should be insurmountable, what were the implications for galactic medicine as a whole? Most concerning of all was the humans' apparent lack of concern about their extraordinary abilities. When asked about their impossible feats during the crisis, most responded with variations of anyone would have done the same or it was no big deal. As Dr. ZYX, 427, completed their incident report, they couldn't help but wonder, were humans exceptionally resilient, or was the rest of the galaxy fundamentally underestimating what was biologically possible? The answer would have to wait, as emergency alarms began blaring again. Somewhere on the station, another human was undoubtedly doing something impossible while insisting it was just part of the job. Breaking protocol. The meeting chamber of Centauri Medical Station's administrative section was in chaos. Holographic displays showed statistical analyses and medical reports while various alien medical professionals argued in 17 different languages. Order, please, Dr. Nexus's crystalline form pulsed with authority. We're here to discuss the proposed implementation of separate human medical protocols. Dr. ZYX, 427, stood before the medical board, their research data floating in elaborate patterns around them. The evidence is clear. Traditional medical protocols are not just ineffective for human patients, they're actively hindering treatment. This is unprecedented, objected Dr. Quantumpulse, a leading physician from the Andromeda sector. We cannot simply create an entirely new category of medical treatment for a single species. With respect, Dr. ZYX, 427, countered, humans have already created their own category. We're just finally acknowledging it. The evidence was irrefutable. Over the past months, they had documented hundreds of cases that defied conventional medical wisdom. Humans routinely survived injuries that should be fatal, recovered from conditions that should be permanent, and demonstrated healing abilities that should be impossible. Look at these neural patterns, Dr. Vapora, 6 highlighted a series of brain scans. Humans can consciously override pain signals, redirect blood flow, and even control their autonomous responses. They don't just ignore medical impossibilities, they actively challenge them. The debate raged for hours. Traditional medical practitioners argued that accepting human medical anomalies would undermine centuries of established practice. Progressive elements suggested that human physiology might offer insights into improving treatment for all species. Finally, Dr. Nexus made the decisive call. As of today, Centauri Medical Station will implement separate protocols for human patients. We can no longer ignore the evidence, humans require their own medical framework. The new protocols were revolutionary. Pain scales were completely redesigned. Recovery timelines were adjusted to account for human healing factors. Most importantly, medical staff were trained to expect the impossible. Part 5, The Human Factor. 6 months after the implementation of the human medical protocols, Dr. ZYX, for 27 stood in the observation deck, watching Earth ships dock with the station. Their research had evolved into something far beyond medical curiosity. Another successful quarter, Dr. Nexus announced, reviewing the latest statistics. Human patient outcomes have improved by 300% since implementing the new protocols. The changes went far beyond mere medical treatment. The entire station had been transformed by their growing understanding of human capabilities. Engineering teams now included humans specifically for their ability to solve problems in ways that defied conventional logic. Emergency response protocols had been revised to account for human, impossible, abilities. It's not just about treating them differently, Dr. ZYX, for 27 observed. It's about understanding that they fundamentally change what we believe is possible. The research continued to yield surprising results. They discovered that human determination could actually alter their physical capabilities. Their bodies adapted to challenges in ways that suggested evolution was an ongoing, active process rather than a historical fact. Most remarkably, human influence had begun to affect other species' treatment. The concept of pushing through recovery, once considered uniquely human, was showing promising results in adapted forms for other species. Perhaps that's the real breakthrough, Dr. Vapora, 6 suggested. Not just understanding human capabilities, but realizing that the boundaries of possible medical treatment are far more flexible than we imagined. The final piece of evidence came during a routine emergency drill. When simulated casualties began arriving at the medical bay, the non-human medical staff displayed unprecedented adaptability and resourcefulness, traits they'd learned from their human colleagues. Dr. ZYX 427's final research entry read, "The human factor in medical treatment isn't just about their unique physiology, it's about their unshakable belief that limitations exist to be overcome." Perhaps that's their greatest contribution to galactic medicine, the idea that impossible is just another problem to be solved. As they watched another group of human engineers casually planning repairs that should be physically impossible, Dr. ZYX for 27 realized that humans hadn't just changed their understanding of medicine, they'd changed their understanding of what was possible. The separate human medical wing had become one of the most studied facilities in the galaxy. Medical practitioners from across the universe came to observe how humans routinely defied medical logic while insisting they were just doing their best. "You know what humans say," Nurse Pulsar commented, watching a recently treated patient insist on returning to work despite having been technically dead just hours earlier. "Where there's a will, there's a way." Dr. ZYX 427's bioluminescent patches glowed with understanding. Perhaps that was the true mystery of human medical treatment, not just their extraordinary abilities, but their absolute refusal to accept that anything was truly impossible. The end.